It's time for Monster Tales.
No, not that kind of tale.
So this is Greg Dykstra, and Greg, you're working on this creature here for a new product we're doing. And just so people know who you are, could you just give us a quick rundown of your career?
Yeah, I've been in film for 38 years. I started working in live action for Phil Tippett, doing visual effects for various shows.
Phil Tippett. Now that goes back a ways.
It does go back a ways.
Yeah.
If people don't know who Phil Tippett is, he was a huge contributor to like the original Star Wars things, but his career goes on and on and on. And I worked with him on like Ghostbusters 2 and RoboCop 2, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and various things like that, and really learned a lot from him. We did everything.
That's great.
You know, mold making and sculpting and set design, or building sets and camera work and all kinds of things that you could learn there. And so that's.
And one thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned a person that helped you that's a lot of people are familiar with that helped make the decision to go to California. Could you talk about that a little?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what to do with my career because I'd always been interested in doing this kind of stuff, just film work and artwork and stuff. And I was living in Indiana and was trying to figure out how to make it work, and I really had no idea. I mean, I just didn't even think about coming to California. It was more like, can I make this work in Indiana? And I called up one of my heroes, or at least the shop, which was Don Post Studios, who a lot of your people
mine
know.
too.
And I just was going to ask him for advice on like, what can I do here, and I didn't expect to get Don Post Jr. answering the phone, but I called, and he did, and the simplest thing he said was, do you have a job, are you in Indiana that you could do in California? And I said, yeah. And he said, then you should just move out here, and then you'll be around, and we can more easily talk, and you can, be in touch with everybody.
Which was really wise advice.
Yeah.
But now, when you approached him a year or two ago, through your sister, I guess, he was at MassFest or something, and so he was like, you wanted to talk to him about this, and he's like, well, who am I compared to you? And it's like, no, you don't understand the influence of some of the pioneers in the business.
It was huge to me. It was, when someone has influenced your childhood, they've inspired you along the way. Somebody like, Don, he says these words and you consider them with a lot of weight.
Yes.
And they're simple. I mean, Don, we eventually then talked on the phone and talked about, I wanted him to know how important he was in my life. Like, he changed everything, because right then I decided, I'll move to California and get a job out there. And it was like, it seemed so simple, but it, it's one of those fragile moments that changes the course of your life. And I just, it was really important and really wise. I mean, it was so simple, right to the point. It's like, it's almost like, do you want to do this or don't you? Not that he put it that way, but it was like, if you want to do it, you just do this, and it's not
very
that
simple. I'm sure it didn't mean much to him, but it changed everything. So so you worked for Phil Tippett, and then what'd you do?
After several films with him, I worked on Nightmare Before Christmas, and I did it kind of hesitantly to begin with. I didn't know what it would be, and I had no idea. But the moment I went in and interviewed with people and talked to Henry Selick and people like Joe Ranft and others, it was just it right away looked like it was going to be one of the most cool projects I would have ever done. And so, luckily, because usually I haven't seen that in the beginning, but I just felt like it was going to be a big thing, and it was just, I was able to kind of savor it all the way through. But I just did. That was the first job where my sole job was to sculpt characters, and so I think I would have to look back. Don't quote me on this, but it's something like 150 individual sculpts. Some of them were parts of characters, some of them were
Right.
finishing other people's characters. A lot of them were just things that I was doing, from the ground up. And but I had a ball, and it turned out, to be this cult classic, and I'm really proud of having made that, said yes, and gone up and actually.
Well, and here's an example when I said no. You mentioned RoboCop. They contacted us way back before the first RoboCop and wanted to know if we wanted to do the mask, and we're going to send out all the stuff, and I just based on the name, I thought that sounds really dumb, and so I turned them down, and of course it turned into a huge hit, and it was a really good movie, very clever concept, but the name was like, and it was the same with Hellraiser. In my mind, that sounded like bikers. And of course, when they send you the stuff, it's all confidential and stuff. And at the time, I was like, it's so stupid. So that's examples of when I didn't, I let my mind get in the way. So
sometimes it does.
So then, what was next?
Well, that's this is an example. I have one of those too. So I worked with a bunch of people. I mentioned Joe Ranft earlier that were either already working for Pixar or were soon to work for Pixar when I was on Nightmare Before Christmas, and so a lot of them were saying, "Hey, you ought to come over to Pixar," but kind of like the way you were describing, you don't know, you hear the name and you're trying to make a judgment. Is this something I want to do?
Well, before it becomes famous, it's like, that's a weird name.
And it wasn't that Pixar was a weird name, but I thought, how can I help this company that does computer, graphics, that are doing computer animation? I knew, nothing about computers other than a motion control system that I used to work with. It was like a giant glorified calculator. It was called the Tondreau system, but it was like these big fat buttons. But that's it. I didn't know, and I kept thinking the only way I could work there is to be like a computer genius, like everybody else. I pictured was. But so I didn't. 3 times I turned him down, and finally Joe Ramp said, you should come up and do this stuff. And I interviewed, and it took a while. There were a few other projects that happened along the way, but then in 2000 I started working for Pixar, and it's been the biggest chunk of my career. I've been so proud of all of that work, everything they've done.
Oh, Pixar. I mean, it's just, you say, you work for Pixar. I'm sure that just kind of changes, people.
It does.
This is a noteworthy person.
That,
and you were there 23 years?
23. Well, I was a member of the studio, like, a permanent, which is used loosely, but a permanent employee for 18 years. And then I've been a contractor with them since then. And you're still doing stuff for them. I still do stuff. The last job I did was at the end of 2022, but there'll probably be stuff coming up very soon too. I stay in touch with them. It's like my home. I walk in there and people, just greet me like we're all family. So
isn't that great?
It's a wonderful place. It's like, it was one of the.
I can imagine it would be, and it's a pioneering business. Back when they're starting this, and there were certain people that believed in it, but a lot of people are like, I don't know if you can do that with a computer. And it really, back in the day, computers were pretty weak, and they, and I could imagine trying to render something like the modern stuff you do would take a week and a half just to get a couple seconds. But anyway.
It took so much faith for all those guys to like just keep holding on to that dream, and the founder Ed Catmull just kept doing that. Eventually Steve Jobs joined that dream, and it became what everybody knows.
Well, it was a dream that was realized quickly because computers grew in strength over double every year, which was predicted, which I don't know how you would know such a thing, but because they became so powerful so quickly, suddenly, you can have hair flowing and things. So now this character. We approached you with the concept, and you're a pretty big Frankenstein fan, right?
I am, I am. It's,
so am I. And so we wanted to do a little different thing. Of course, there's copyright stuff you have to watch out for. So this is going to Mary Shelley's descriptions and things, and not so much the what the movie did with Boris Karloff, who I think is both of our favorite version. I mean, that was magic. I mean, absolute magic. Let's go over just some of the little hints, because you research this stuff well. I mean, it's fascinating talking to Greg, because Greg is like an encyclopedia for this stuff. So besides, like they having to build up the cotton latex and Boris Karloff having to go home and sleep in his makeup and have it touched up in the morning, all these things. There was Jack Pierce was trying to get this sunken cheek thing. And so what did Boris do?
So Boris said, and I don't think Jack knew, that he had dentures. He had some false teeth on at least one side. I'm not sure how big they were, but it was his left. Is that right? No, it's his right side.
Yeah. Right.
But he said, well, I could pull out my dentures, and he pulled them out, and his cheek sunk in, and it gave Jack exactly what he wanted. And I remember too being a little kid, not knowing this story.
Yeah.
And thought, wow, how did they?
Oh, it looks so impoverished and strange.
Yeah.
And I never thought about that, but that's not makeup. And in fact, I got in a big argument with Jordu, because we were talking about London After Midnight, and Lon Chaney Sr. had this insane smile. And I said, Jordu, that's prosthetics. No human can smile like that. And he goes, Ed, it did. He had wires in his teeth, and he put those teeth in, those wires would yank his mouth up. And I thought, that's brilliant. Yeah. And he could only handle it for a few minutes at a time.
Yeah, I'm sure it was
incredibly painful.
Yeah.
But so these kinds of things, I think, get lost.
Yeah,
and to me, they're fascinating. Because these things that started what we do, and 1931, that's a long time ago.
A long time ago. And so many things invented on that movie.
And these guys are making up out of whole cloth. I mean, they're just like, how do I do this? How do I do that? And then it becomes iconic to where you and I are talking about a movie that was made almost 100 years ago, and a character that was written about before that, and it's just so.
Yeah. We were talking earlier about Mary Shelley, and that we as much as we are both huge fans of the Boris Karloff, Universal Frankenstein stuff, and it stands on its own, and it's so amazing, and nothing could ever touch that.
No.
But they own the rights to Universal owns the rights to that, and well, they should.
Yeah.
And but when Mary Shelley wrote this book in the early 1800s, and it was a huge hit, and it changed her life, and it
very unusual for the time.
Yeah.
It's like Poe was Edgar Allan Poe. He was such a pioneer that it was like, what kind of writing is this?
Yeah, if I was unless I'm mistaken, Mary Shelley first published it without her name on it, because they didn't, they were worried that if people saw, the publishers and maybe the readership too, they wouldn't read it if it was written by a woman. When it became big, she put her name on it.
That's true throughout our industry.
Yeah.
This idea, like the gal that's sculpted Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Right.
Genius sculpture.
Yeah, she did the drawings. Yeah, she was the.
I thought she sculpted him.
There's another guy who sculpted. Now I'm gonna have to remember his name.
Okay.
There were actually 3 sculptors that did the work.
Well, I'm sure.
But that shouldn't downplay what she could do. She worked for Disney. She did.
Oh yeah.
She did stuff from Fantasia, like the big devil on ball, whatever. But she did. It was a really difficult animation she did with pastels.
Yeah.
I mean, every drawing was had to be a brand new drawing with pastels, and she was also an actress and
I know, but it's finally changed, and
she created that design though. Nothing without her drawings, we wouldn't have this character at all. So.
Well, and that's one of the things that really struck me about you is your ability to do really different, effective thumbnails quickly. and that's something that it's hard to get. I gotta go, unfortunately.
I realize that, yeah.
But anyway, Greg, thank you so much for,
Why don't we put a cap on
Sure.
just this,
Yeah.
just really quickly.
You bet.
You'll probably cut that part, but just to add, so this is based on Mary Shelley's, which leaves Mary Shelley's description of the creature, and it leaves a lot of room for interpretation. But it's going down that path and trying to see what you could do with what she gave us, like the description that she gave us, because it is broad and it's good because when you read it, your imagination takes over and you imagine your own version of it, which is what we've done.
So this is Mary Shelley / Greg Dykstra with a little pinch of distortion. We just
you
came
too, no, because
Yeah.
so he's not taking the credit he should, just so that he is taking the credit he should. You chose from many different drawings, which means that you're making a choice.
Well, yeah, but who knows if they're
just the
right
one.
We'll show
see.
people the other drawings. All right, that's
Okay.
it from here at Distortions Unlimited. Greg, thank you so much for coming out and
Thank you.
spending some time out here and making this cool monster.
You're welcome. Thanks.